This week on the other side, who needs Halloween when you've got Australian governments to deal with? Former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman joins our panel to discuss the latest polls and division within the Liberal and National parties around Australia. I hate to say we told you so, but there's now no interest rate relief in sight thanks to the terrible inflation data that came out this week. We shall explain all. Donald Trump and China's President Xi meet. We'll discuss what that means for Australia. One Australian state goes even more insanely woke with race-based hospital treatments, while another starts to push back slightly on trans ideology to protect kids. We'll talk about that. And what is a right-wing union? And why are they becoming more popular? G'day Wollongong, g'day Perth, and g'day Australia. This is episode 432 of The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday, October 31, 2025. It is Halloween. The Other Side is your deep dive on the important issues that matter in Australia and that affect us from around the world from a different, non-left-wing perspective. We always declare our bias right up front, so you know what lens we're viewing things from. We're a news commentary show. We are centre-right politically. We exist to counter what we see as a heavy centre-left bias in the Australian mainstream media, to bring you the other side of debates that you may not even hear on the mainstream channels. And we always try to keep it real and give you the data and facts behind the stories that we cover too. If you'd like to support us, pop over to our website at othersidetv.com.au, or you can use the QR code on the screen. You can sign up there to help fund our work for less than $5 a month. Shocking inflation data this week, with prices rising 3.2% from last September quarter to this September quarter. The Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, needs inflation between 2 and 3%. So it's over that. That's its target before it'll even consider dropping any interest rates. So experts say that there's zero chance now of a further interest rate cut when the bank meets on Melbourne Cup Day this Tuesday. And it's highly unlikely that they'll be dropping them at the December meeting either. And that's if you believe the way our government manages inflation is accurate. I don't even believe that. I think real inflation is much higher than the Consumer Price Index, which is based on a questionable basket of goods. And people are really feeling the pinch much more than just 3.2% a year. Electricity costs are the biggest driver by far of that increase. Power bills have surged 9% in just the September quarter, and a staggering 24, no decimal places, 24% over the past year on electricity. So net zero is working out just great for making our country poorer and weaker. Everyone laughed at our side of politics and we said it was a bad idea. They're not laughing so hard now. Jim Chalmers insists that inflation reduction, not the creation of it through socialism, is his top priority.
We have made it clear that we want to make more progress on inflation. We've made it very clear that progress often isn't in a straight line, as we've seen around the world. We know that there's more work to do, and that's our focus.
Yes, of course it is. Jim Chalmers in Parliament this week. Housing costs are still rising, but they're stabilising a little bit. Rents are up only around 4% annually, which sounds a little lower than it feels to me too. But anyway, thankfully, vacancy rates have stabilised in most capital cities. But property rates and charges have jumped significantly. Good old big government with its hand in your pocket yet again. Food prices are up 3.1% annually, driven particularly by eating out and takeaway meals, so we need to probably cook at home a bit more. If you noticed your morning coffee costing more, you're not imagining things. 14.6% inflation on the price of coffee and tea. Recreation and transport costs are up. Holiday accommodation, airfare prices and petrol prices have all edged higher. We have been saying on this show for years that there's no way that there's going to be a long-term cycle of interest rate cuts in Australia. Experts continue to claim that there'll be a long-term rate cut cycle any minute now. Rates were at their lowest point ever in November 2020 during COVID, when the RBA cut from 0.35 to 0.1%. Remember that? November 2020. That's where they stayed until May 2022, when they started the rate rise cycle. Then we had 13 rises in interest rates from May 2022 through to November 2023. And that Those 13 rises got the base interest rate up to 4.35%. It'll turn soon, people said. No, of course not. The Reserve Bank simply can't bring interest rates down when inflation is high, because cutting rates stimulates spending, which drives prices up further, and you get into a bit of a spiral of doom. In February this year, we got the first cut in 15 months. It went back down 0.25% to 4.1, then another 0.25%, or 25 basis points, as the finance bros like to say. In May this year, that got it down to 3.85. Then the August cut came. That went down to 3.6. And one or two more before the end of the year, the experts said. No way, we said, and we were right. Inflation is not under control, and everybody knows it. Government is bloated and still overspending and still massively in debt. We hear all the pundits and pollies on TV talking about fiscal policy and monetary policy. But what do those terms actually mean? Monetary policy is how a country's central bank manages money and interest rates to try to keep prices stable, to support jobs, and to guide economic growth. Fiscal policy is the management of government spending and debt by government. Managing the budget, how much does the government spend, how much does it tax, and how much does it borrow? That's fiscal policy. When governments borrow and spend too much, economists call that poor fiscal discipline. Poor fiscal discipline. And that is what we think is keeping inflation higher for longer, forcing the Reserve Bank to hold off on any rate cuts. When governments spend heavily through things like welfare, cost of living relief, electricity bill handouts, renewable energy subsidies, gigantic national broadcasters like the ABC, too much meddling bureaucracy, pet projects driving woke agendas, it all costs money and it all adds up. It also artificially stimulates the economy, which drives up demand in a fake way, which then causes inflation. Now, the government actually had a budget surplus in 2024. We're not overspending, they said, but a lot of that surplus came from temporary high commodity prices, not from long-term good governance and spending restraint. Structural spending on health, the NDIS, aged care, and defence all remains high, meaning future deficits are likely and somewhat necessary. The takeaway, until Canberra shows more fiscal discipline around the unnecessary stuff, Australians that are hoping for lower prices and lower mortgage rates will be waiting a little bit longer. A 34-year-old Muslim immigrant to the United States from Uganda, who is a self-declared, very, very proud socialist, is likely to be elected the mayor of the world's biggest capitalist city, New York, this week. Zoran Mamdani was endorsed to be the nominee for the Democratic Party as that party in America continues to shift further and further left. He's just a kid, 34 years old, but he's gonna win. He's polling at 50%. The former governor of New York State, Andrew Cuomo, also a Democrat, is running against him because of concerns about how extreme a socialist Mamdani would be for New York. But Cuomo is polling at only 25%, while the Republican candidate is on just 21%. Mamdani is a shoo-in. He is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. That's the same movement that includes figures like AOC, the young New York Democrat Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Mamdani has used classic left-wing rhetoric about giving away heaps of freebies while taxing the rich to pay for it. A narrative that socialist parties like the Greens in Australia have been using for, 150 years. Socialism doesn't work because it crushes private property rights, which totally kills people's incentive to work or to innovate, and especially to take any risks. Every country that's ever tried it has gotten poorer. And it gets corrupted in about 2 seconds flat, because instead of millions of people in a free market having the power to dictate what gets produced and what services are provided through their spending decisions, socialism concentrates power in the hands of a tiny group of elites, and they make all the decisions. But every generation, young people think, this sounds nice, and they support it for about 10 years and then they grow up, some of them. But Mamdani isn't one of them. He's a walking left-wing cliche. And he says his goal is to, quote, put working class people before real estate and Wall Street. Yes, because the success of Wall Street has nothing to do with the wealth and prosperity of the working class people and all Americans. Of course, he wants public housing expansion and rent controls because nothing makes people want to invest and build housing like knowing that they won't be able to charge a fair market rate of rent. He wants free public transport and investment in green infrastructure and free healthcare and better workers' rights. And yeah, who doesn't, mate? Like most 34-year-olds who still haven't grown up and out of their childhood socialism phase, when asked how he's going to pay for all this, he says, you guessed it, we're going to tax the rich bastards. As if the rich are going to bother working so hard and taking risks in business just to be taxed to death by a fat, bloated government run by a narcissist who thinks they know what's best for everyone at just 34 years of age. Honestly, folks, how many more decades is it going to take before we just put socialism to bed forever? It has never worked anywhere in the world, and it usually ends up destroying democracy, freedom, and wealth at best, and governments murdering tens of millions of their own citizens at worst. This clown has actually said America should not have billionaires. And just in case you had any doubt that he was a full-blown Marxist commie, he says the end goal is, quote, seizing the means of production. Of course, the people of the great city of New York are too smart to vote for this and see straight through the scam, right? Oh, no, they're not. They're going to put him right into City Hall. Speaking of commies, St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne has put in place a new policy that gives faster emergency department treatment to Indigenous patients. The policy requires all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients presenting at the emergency department to receive, at minimum, a Category 3 triage status, which is the urgent status. And that means that they have to be seen within 30 minutes of arrival. Triage and emergency treatment priorities in a hospital should be based purely on clinical need and never be based on a person's skin colour, race or heritage. People talk about this being reverse discrimination. There's nothing reverse about it. It's discrimination, racism, pure and simple, by treating patients who do not have ancestors who were here before 1788 as second-class citizens. There's no debate to be had here. Zero. Nothing could justify this. The Victorian Labor Premier, Jacinta Allen, has backed the hospital's policy, of course. Those in favour say it's designed to address historical inequities and improve access and cultural safety. Right. So a patient that has a Category 2 issue has got to wait behind an Aboriginal person with a minor injury, Category 1, because they automatically get elevated to Category 3, to urgent. Right. What the heck is cultural safety? Some BS term invented by Marxist academics from social science departments now working in Victoria's health department, I guess. And they want to improve access. Okay, that's good. How about improving access for everybody instead of for just one group in society based on their race? Honestly, why is this even a thing in our country? What the heck is going on? This is apartheid. It's racism. It's clearly wrong. A 2-year-old can see it. Obviously, the authorities at St Vincent's and the Victorian government do not have the rational or emotional intelligence of a 2-year-old. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping met face-to-face for the first time since 2019 in South Korea on Thursday. They were expected to speak for several hours, but it was all done in a little over an hour and a half. There were some significant decisions, most of all a truce in the ongoing trade war, very important, between the world's two biggest economies, and those economies are very intertwined. China needs America's customer base for the products that it produces, and America needs China's cheap products. China has agreed to delay export restrictions on 5 rare earth minerals that it announced this month, so it's not going to do that. But restrictions on a further 7 rare earth minerals will remain. President Xi promised to work, quote, very hard to stop the flow of fentanyl, a powerful synthetic opiate out of China and into America that Donald Trump's very concerned about. Washington said it would have its 20% fentanyl-related extra tariff on China relaxed. Overall, this will bring the tariff rate on Chinese goods down from 57% to 47%. China's average tariffs on US goods is 32%. Trump will visit China in April and Xi is expected to visit the US sometime after that. President Trump said the US and China agreed to work together on the war in Ukraine. Experts don't think that's going to happen. China clearly backs Russia in that war and has been supplying it. And meanwhile, the issue of Taiwan, which China claims sovereignty over, did not come up, Trump said. SmartKits Australia is a leading supplier of prefabricated home improvement kits, so you can do it yourself, save money and hassle. SmartKits Australia is the easiest way to improve your home and build memories that last forever. Buy online, customize your way, get it built. That's the SmartKits way. Decks, patios, pergolas, flyover roofs, carports, and insulated roofing, all prefabricated, fully engineered, and delivered anywhere in Australia. You can choose from hundreds of pre-designed SmartKits on their website, or you can go custom with SmartKits' in-house design team. Every kit is engineered tough, packed smart, and delivered free anywhere in Australia. And don't worry if you're not so handy. If you need it installed, they can do that too. Their licensed builder network can get you started even faster. It's up to you. So save thousands on your own 100% Australian-made smart kit. Build your own outdoor lifestyles with SmartKits Australia. SmartKits.com.au, a proud sponsor of The Other Side. There's a campaign underway right now by the Free Speech Union of Australia to raise money so that a landmark legal case can proceed in Western Australia that's going to have really important implications for protecting the right to free speech in our whole country and the right to object to the left shoving its ideology down everyone's throats without losing your livelihood, your career, your job and your health. The Free Speech Union wants to help a man take a city council to court for what he says was a refusal to comply with modern gender ideology and undertake a diversity, equity and inclusion training. The city council in question is the city of Armidale. That's Armidale with 3 A's, a city council area covering the southeastern suburbs of Perth. The man who wants to take the action against the council is Declan Mansfield, a library clerk who became very concerned about Marxist critical theory gender politics slowly creeping into the library and the city council's culture.
There was posters all over the library. They would wear lanyards. There was relentless emails, training sessions. I don't care what somebody's sexuality is, what they identify as, what their beliefs are. That's none of my business. But I believe that government institutions, some of them at least, local government in particular, need to be politically and philosophically neutral. Diversity, equity and inclusion, and its subcategory, you could say, of transgender ideology, gender ideology, is not politically neutral. A former British cabinet minister described it as sneaking politics in the back door, which is absolutely true. 2 members of staff had a very deliberate conversation in front of me where one of them was explaining to the other, with the other's enthusiasm, that this person's ambition was to queer the library, which has a philosophical meaning, not necessarily linked to being gay or something like that. It's a political thing. They were mis-shelving books if they didn't like the book, which means that, for example, if somebody came up to me and said, "Where's such and such a book?" or they looked on the catalogue, you wouldn't be able to find the book because it's somewhere else.
That's from a documentary put together by Free Speech Union of Australia, which you can check out on their website. Declan Mansfield's case for unlawful discrimination is now headed to the West Australian Tribunal, Administrative Tribunal, and Declan Mansfield joins us now on the other side online from Perth. Declan, thanks very much for joining us, mate. This is, how long had you been working for Armidale City Libraries in Perth?
I worked there for approximately 15 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, so mainly the last 13 years on the front desk. So if you came in the library, I was most likely the person who would serve you.
So you were sort of complained about by other staff, and then you were asked to do this D.E.I, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. You expressed concerns about that, and the bosses said there won't be any ideological content in the training. What happened?
there is regular training sessions, but there was a small minority of staff who were essentially zealots for transgender ideology. And then management themselves, library management, were supporting this as well, and also Armadale Library from the CEO down. So the whole council basically is saturated with the ideology. Excuse me.
And you felt that very strongly because you were writing articles for the Spectator magazine for quite a while. So you had sort of centre-right, this is a centre-right publication, you had centre-right leaning politics and ideas, especially around culture. And people were noticing that and giving you a hard time at work.
Yeah, for the first, I didn't tell anybody I was writing my articles for a while. And then maybe 2 or 3 years went by. And I think management discovered I was writing articles, and they described my views as one of the managers said to people, have you read the terrible things that Declan writes? So so they discovered me anyway, and slowly things changed over a period of years, until finally, about a year before I finished in the job, I was sent an email asking me to do training, which I replied to and said I wasn't going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Excuse me. And about a year, I thought they left me alone. And about a year later, they sent another email out, which was explicitly directed at me, as we've discovered with the Freedom of Information release. And so I pretty much told my manager and the branch librarian that I wasn't going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And that was one of there was two, how would I put it, two parallel investigations happened at nearly exactly at the same time. I was also accused of bullying and harassment, and human resources got involved in this. And so there was a
funny that when you say you're not going to do a DEI training, suddenly there's a complaint against you for bullying and harassment. Seems to happen a lot. The DEI training, of course, and the reason that we all need to start pushing back on this stuff is because it's not politically neutral, is it?
It's not politically neutral at all. It pretends to be politically neutral. It pretends to be sort of the surface level is all fuzzy and fluffy and colourful and all this kind of thing. But beneath the surface of diversity, equity, and inclusion is an explicit, probably hard left, basically, ideology. And the words don't mean, as I've said before, what they say on the tin is not contained in the box. Yeah. So,
but this is the thing. Do you think people are waking up to that? That like this is Marxism wrapped up as something fluffy and nice that they don't understand. The average Aussie maybe doesn't understand that there is a very deep ideology behind all this stuff that's been driven through our universities, that's been driven through corporates, through HR, through. Are people waking up, do you reckon?
I think people are slowly waking up, but I still think the majority don't know the difference. And I think we're part way there, but there needs to be more publicity and explanation of what exactly this is. I have been telling people for years exactly what it is, and people didn't quite believe me at the start. But now they do. A lot of people sort of have seen what I was saying. It's not only me. There's people all over the world responding to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's quite extraordinary. But only yesterday, I asked how many superannuation funds. I asked AI how many superannuation funds have diversity, equity, and inclusion as a central idea, and all the top 50 funds in Australia have diversity, equity, and inclusion as an underlying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the S part of ESG. People don't realize that either, right? It's the sustainability social part, and it's pretty dark. It's scary stuff. I think we laugh a little bit about this, but it is very serious because unlike you, lots of people aren't in a position to or don't have the courage to kind of put their necks on the line or their job on the line and stand up against this stuff. So it gets brought in and it perpetuates by default.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you loved this job? You were in it for a long time. You had to quit. That's got to suck.
Yeah, it does suck. I loved the job. It was my little job. I liked the social aspect. I liked the people I was working with. I liked the whole range of things. And I really miss it, believe it or not. But I decided I couldn't go through with this. I think some people have an opportunity to say, I'm like, as the saying goes in the video, thus far and no further. And I really couldn't look at myself in the face and say, well, I'm going to accept this. So some people have called me a fool for doing it, but you have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I stood up for something. And I think right around the world and in Australia as well, if you have an opportunity to do this, you should take it. And I'm in a position where I can take it. And so it hasn't been good, the results of it since, though.
All right, so you're going to the tribunal soon. What's the step after the tribunal, Declan? You then it then goes to court, or if you don't get the outcome you want in the tribunal?
As far as I know, the tribunal is the final say.
Oh, okay.
The tribunal will determine the end result. We've gone through the Equal Opportunities Commission and a few other things like that, and so we had a suspicion that it would come this far. We didn't think that the Equal Opportunities Commission was going to what I think is do the right thing. But it was very interesting because the Equal Opportunity Commissioner in Western Australia supports diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, we're sort of in a bit of a trap with that because all of these people in the bureaucracy are kind of bought into the ideology anyway, and they don't see it as political. They see it as kind and nice.
Yes.
In Western Australia, the Equal Opportunity Act of 1984 actually makes it unlawful for an employer to discriminate against an employee on the grounds of an employee's religious or political conviction. So your case is advancing on that basis, right? That it's a question of you being forced out of your job in a sense or discriminated against at work because of your political convictions. So it's going to set a pretty important precedent.
Well, I'm hoping it does, and I think the Free Speech Union of Australia is hoping it does as well, because essentially what we're saying is our hoping is that it does create a precedent, and that employers and institutions around Australia can't allow this to happen again, or can't instigate this type of thing again. That it doesn't go any further. This is it, and we're putting a line in the sand. Hopefully, that's the ambition anyway.
All right, Declan. Well, good luck with that. Let us know how you go. Come back on the show and let us know later how it all goes. We're going to just put that website on the screen. I think it's Free Speech Union. .au, if I'm not mistaken, freespeechunion.au, so no .com or anything, just freespeechunion.au, or you can go /support Declan as well if you want to go straight to the page to support this case, which I think is pretty important stuff. We did approach the city of Armidale for comment, I should say. We did not receive a reply. Did you know that with a virtual private network or VPN on your computer, tablet, or phone, you can log into your favorite streaming services like Netflix from home with an internet address from anywhere in the world and watch all the shows that they offer in other countries, including stuff in different languages? And using a VPN to route all your internet traffic through a third-party server means that big corporations and big government can't spy on you. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they're the best VPN servers out there, as a viewer of the other side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/other side. That's piavpn.com/other side. It's a great service, a rock bottom price, and supporting our sponsor, you are helping to keep the other side going and growing. Australia's only LNP, or Liberal National Party majority government, the state government in Queensland of Premier David Crisafulli, has rolled out a new definition of what a woman is, sort of. A woman is an adult female human being, the state's Minister for Women, Fiona Simpson, said last week when answering a question asked of her in Parliament. The definition of the previous Labor government was much more, shall we say, modern and progressive, or should I say regressive, perhaps. Their bureaucrats defined woman to mean all people who identify as a woman or a girl. The question came from the Katter's Australian Party state leader, Robbie Katter, and he also asked directly if the minister and her department consider transgender people as women. The LNP minister didn't answer that bit, but said only that a transgender person was, quote, someone whose gender identity is opposite to the sex the person was born with. The precedent set in our only conservative-leaning state affects all Australians. This week, the Premier himself, David Crisafulli, also dodged the specifics of that second question. The Australian newspaper reports Premier Crisafulli also refused to clarify whether the new definition of a woman being an adult female human being includes transgender women or not. It probably does, because all states and territories let people self-identify their gender now. Even Queensland dropped the need for a person to have had surgical gender reassignment before being allowed to just change their sex on their birth certificate and driver's license. The reason the politicians are avoiding the question is not just that it's a political minefield, but also a legal minefield. This stuff impacts how governments spend your tax dollars. The Queensland government has a program that dishes out $20 million for women's career grants, for example, whatever they are. More importantly, Queensland has a Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence Minister, Amanda Cam, and she told Parliament that in order to protect women, you need to know how to define a woman. Hear, hear. Our panel this week is former LNP Queensland Premier Campbell Newman and the National Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Australia, the fast-growing alternative non-left-wing teachers union, Ed Schuller. Campbell, welcome. Good to have you here.
G'day.
Ed, good to see you too, mate. Campbell, you've got to be glad that you were Premier of Queensland in simpler times when, we pretty much knew.
How far we've come in 10 years, hey?
Yeah.
What an enlightened state we are.
What an enlightened culture we've become in the Western world.
Damien, look, this is a nonsense when it comes to Queensland particularly, because Queensland is a blue-collar conservative state. And I can tell you right now, across the vast majority of Queenslanders, they're very clear what a woman is. And it's only the inner city elites in the 4 or 5 kilometres around the GPO of Brisbane where the smart Alex live, the opinion leaders live, the loud voices live, the leaders of the judiciary and the media and, politics, etc. Apart from those locations, men and women across Queensland know what a woman is.
Yeah. It's and I think people are pretty open-minded and
that's a different issue.
Totally.
People are very live and let live. They don't, they understand that everyone's got a right to live their life the way they want to live it. But when these things get pushed onto them, for example, that you must acknowledge the pronouns of people who are at the risk of censure, then that's too much. And so I don't know why David Crisafulli sort of squibbed it. It was a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, well,
they sort of got there, but they didn't. They ran away back to the doghouse.
Yeah, I'll answer that first question, but not that second one. No, that's right. Ed, this has got to be having an impact on teachers and the classroom today, because one of the things that I get really annoyed about is whilst we should be accepting, perhaps we should be tolerant even, we certainly shouldn't be promoting this radical left-wing, because it is radical left-wing neo-Marxist theory. It's gender ideology. It's modern gender theory, and it's invading the classrooms.
Yeah, it's all over the classrooms, not just in Queensland. Obviously, Victoria is long gone. There's a lot of issues down there. Specifically in Victoria, children are allowed to socially transition without parental knowledge whatsoever. And that's got a bit of media traction. recently, but that's again a matter of, okay, who's parenting the children here? Is it the government or is it parents? But in Queensland as well, we've surveyed our members Australia-wide, but we've got a large contingent in Queensland, and 91% of them said there's no place for transgender ideology in the classroom. And I think another part of it is 85% said, no, you can't actually become a member of the opposite sex. And I think that gets to the core of the issue. And I think and I don't know if we might disagree on this, but I think where conservatives have sort of ceded the ground on this issue as well is sort of saying, oh, well, it's only really a matter of informed consent for children. You know, if it's, when you turn 18, you can obviously make decisions for yourself like you can in any walk of life, which is true. But if it's true if it can be true for an 18-year-old to change their sex, then the natural progression of that will be prepubescent kids. Okay, we'll stop the sex. If you can actually be born in the wrong body, they're going to bring that forward. So I think conservatives probably need to be a little bit stronger on this one and say, no, it's not true of all ages. It's not an unloving or a hateful thing to say that. Love doesn't rejoice in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. And I think that's sort of what we need to get back to on this matter. You can't change your sex. It's just a reality. And we need to have compassion with the people who think that they can. But particularly for kids, I mean, there's just no room. No room for that at all.
Absolutely no room for it, and it is really infuriating that we are doing what we're doing to kids. And on that note, we all know very well that gender ideology is dangerous stuff because it leads to kids undergoing chemical and surgical treatments who in some cases may not require them, and without the proper unbiased psychological assessments and support also, as numerous inquiries around the world have actually shown us. And all of that led the Queensland LNP government to put a freeze on puberty blockers for under 18s. On Tuesday this week, the Supreme Court in Brisbane overturned that freeze on the grounds that it was brought in without adequate consultation with health professionals. But just hours later, and not to be overruled, the Health Minister Tim Nicholls took the People's Chamber's power into his hands and issued a new ministerial directive to reinforce the ban, overriding the court ruling, as he has the right to do. Now, this ban didn't come out of nowhere. It followed public outrage after the news that a state-run gender clinic in Queensland had treated almost 40 children without parental consent. Yep, you heard me. Let that sink in for a minute. A state-run gender clinic had treated almost 40 children without parental consent. That's the way Labor likes it. The state controls your kids, not the parents. Parents are yucky and mean, and the state is kind and loving. Remember that. Health Minister Tim Nicholls said, we owe it to children to ensure that care is grounded on solid evidence and we act with caution. Campbell Newman, Tim Nicholls is on the right track here.
Oh, absolutely. And so again, it's this case of where the LNP are going on this issue. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But on this one, Nicholls is really doing exactly what needs to be done. And as you have said, children are the children of their parents. They are not the children of the state. And I think a really good thing that the LNP could do would be to really put a stake in the ground and reaffirm that principle, because it extends across a variety of issues today where, we have seen across the nation legislation that seeks to sort of undermine the role of parents. And, I think that's one of the things, again, in a blue-collar conservative state, parents would normally expect that, they're the ones in charge of the upbringing of their children. They would be probably surprised to see how it's been undermined in various ways over the years.
Well, it's a subtle, but it's a very Marxist thing, right? To sort of say the state is in control.
It's parents are not. Well, it's something. It's like out of any of these books that once upon a time we used to study, which taught us about dystopia. Dystopia. Brave New World. 1980. Where there was no concept about parents at all. Or 1984, where the young scouts or whatever they were called were busy dobbing in their parents for thought crimes. Yeah.
On the far left and on the far right, you've got the Nazis infiltrating the children with the Hitler Youth, and all authoritarian regimes have done this. And it's like, here's this subtle sort of elimination of parental authority and parental power. It's a bit like parents not being able to get access to information about their children's mental health. Well,
the state should only be stepping in. I'm sure Ed would agree if there's a clear-cut case that the parents are not fit to be bringing up their kids. And that comes down to abuse about, not getting them to school, not making sure they've got 3 meals a day, being dressed etc., and sheltered. That's a different issue. But that line gets pushed all the time by bureaucrats and stupid, gutless politicians of both political persuasions, or left and the right, are foolish enough to actually sort of go along with some of this stuff.
I don't want to praise the Minister Tim Nicholls in Queensland, the Health Minister, too much, because he's the guy who hasn't reinstated Dr. Gillian Anderson, who we had on this show, who was a psychiatrist who stood up against this ideology in the department and got fired. And the LNP government came in, they still haven't reappointed her.
Yeah, and for your viewers as well, she was fired after she was invited to attend and speak at a forum about that very topic. And she said, look, it should be evidence-based. We're not so sure that it is at the moment. And she's been stood down and the minister hasn't acted on it. And the government hasn't really been inclined to act on it, which is completely worrying. Like you said, sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And again, it just means that Conservatives have really struggled to stand on any principle, on any conviction here. And I think that's the thing. And maybe it is a matter of, there's a level of political convenience in talking about, stopping these puberty blockers. Obviously, it's the right thing to do. But why won't they just say the truth? Why won't the Premier, when he's asked that question, say, no, like that's a transgender man is not a woman, a male that...
Well, look, if we walk the streets of Ingham, where David Christoforley grew up, and we talked to friends from those years ago, from his upbringing, the families around, I'm sure that they would be quite indignant that he was unable to answer that question. They'd be going, David, you've lost the plot.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned child protection as well, just quickly. You mentioned child protection, what it used to be. Now it has sort of become, you're taking the child's rights away if you stop them from being able to do this. This is what the trans rights groups are saying. It's like, no, it is protecting these children. They do need to have some level of informed consent. But how is it protecting
and at least
children?
The psychologists, which they didn't even get. They weren't even getting proper psychological care.
Exactly.
In the Tavistock hearing that in the UK, which is the treatment methodology that the Queensland ones are based on, I think, or the Cairns one was based on.
But can you imagine that as a parenting tactic, just affirming, like anything that your child says or does, that's your tactic, that's the way that you love them. It's just to affirm. You're like, actually,
you're Superman. Go jump off the roof.
Exactly. But that's not even good for the kids. It might be good. It might feel good in the short term, and it's sort of cozy relationship that a lot of parents want to have, where they're just friends with their children, and there's not really a level of respect there. I think it's increasingly worrying because the government is the vehicle at which this parental setup is happening. And that's sort of what.
And by the way, the inconsistencies of the left in their view of the world, come out in this issue, just like in so many other things. It's like, it's so kids under 18 can sort of be allowed to, in their worldview, to be able to be prescribed puberty blockers and go through a transition, etc. But drive a car. It's like, you get 100 hours up, and it's got to be surveyed. You got to be tracked, and it's got to be documented. I mean, come on. I mean, they're all over the shop. It's sort of. One could argue under their regime, it's easier to go and get. It has been easier to go and get puberty blockers at the age of 15 than many other things in life. Exactly.
Right. Hold that thought about conviction. I think that point you made about conviction of the right, of the Conservatives and even Libertarians on the centre right and values are at the core of what we're going to talk about next. We're going to come back and have a look at where the Conservative political realm is in Australia at the moment.
You're watching The Other Side with Damien Coorey, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
We've all seen how the Liberal and National Party coalitions swing to the left since the beginning of this year lost it, Peter Dutton's winning lead he had at the end of last year. And since Susan Lee's takeover and push even further to a modern, progressive, more centrist approach, National opinion polls have seen the coalition crash to a record low 28% primary vote in the Australian's news poll, or 26% if you believe the radically left-wing Guardian newspaper's Essential poll. That's the combined total of the two parties in the coalition, remember? Okay, there's the Liberals and the Nationals, 26%. That's compared to Labor's 37% in the last news poll, or 36% in the Essential poll, which itself is absolutely nothing to crow about, Labor people. Australia's radically socialist party, the Greens, according to the Australian, are hovering at around 12% support, but the Guardian has them at just 9%, while the conservative One Nation is on the rise at 11% according to Newspoll and 15% according to Essential poll. This is mostly off the back of people unhappy with the coalition's push more towards the political left. But we should also look closely at a recent state poll in Queensland. Why Queensland? Well, it's a bit of a barometer for the coalition because it's the only majority Liberal and National Party government in Australia. Tasmania is a minority Liberal government. And there have been polls lately on how Premier David Crisafulli is doing that reveal a few interesting things. The Courier-Mail reported this week that David Crisafulli's LNP maintains a strong lead over Labor 1 year after the state election, despite bleeding votes to One Nation. The LNP leads Labor 54 to 46% on a two-party preferred vote, according to Demos AU Premier National Polling. On the preferred Premier rating, Mr Crisafulli leads opposition leader Stephen Miles 44% to 32%. The Courier-Mail says its poll reveals that the LNP remains in the same position that it did at the October 2024 election. Since the state election, the LNP's primary vote has fallen 4.5% to 37%. Its voters are flocking to One Nation, which recorded a 6% bump in its primary vote since the election to reach 14% in Queensland. Labor's primary has fallen 3.6% to 29% since the Queensland election. Well, joining me in the studio are our other side guests for this week, former LNP Queensland Premier Campbell Newman and National Secretary of the Alternative Teachers Union, the TPAA, Ed Schuler. Campbell, to you firstly, our viewers might not know this, but David Crisafulli played a very small target approach in the election campaign. He hasn't been a really strongly outspoken leader in terms of a lot of the values issues. What's your take on these polls and how he's going?
Okay, very quick context. We lost in 2015, and that's painted as this incredible disaster. I suppose it was bad from the point of view of losing government, but we lost with a primary vote of 41.3%. After 10 years of a lousy Labor government, Crisafulli was elected with a primary of 41.56%.
Okay.
So 26
more than you lost by.
26%. Okay, so the preference dynamics are obviously significantly different, but they should have won that election with a primary of 44. And for the primary vote now to be below 40, for the primary votes to be going off to One Nation is no cause for celebration, because preferences can be fickle things. And it's also being helped, of course, by the Labor Party primary being depressed as well. So I think what you're seeing in Queensland is a real barometer which mirrors what's going on nationally, where the supposed right of centre Liberal National parties are bleeding votes to more right-wing parties because they are not making a stand on things that really matter. And I would go further and say the fact that they will not take a position on values-based issues is a critical issue, critical part of this. And they're on the road to hell. And the national schism that's occurring right now would happen in Queensland if they weren't in government. The fact they're in government, there's an LNP government, means there's some glue that holds that together. But right now, it's a matter of timing. If Crisafulli hadn't have run the election, if this was the lead up to the state election this year, I think they'd be in a world of hurt.
So you're basically saying the only thing that, like, Liberal National Party are a wreck all over the country, and the only thing that's keeping it together in Queensland is the fact that they're in government.
They're a wreck here too. Well, those numbers show they're a wreck. It's the same. That's the same move on primary that we're seeing nationally. And the forces within the LNP. I mean, this is a government that ignore their members. right? So their members would have a very clear idea about the definition of a woman. Their members were very clear about the voice and treaty and things like that. And Christopher Foley's just created this process where there's a direct voice to cabinet. I mean, we could go on. The members are against net zero.
Everybody
but the
within the LNP is going to say, Campbell, we have to be centrist.
Well, what's hard about these issues? I mean, what do you reckon? I mean, why? Like, okay, I think it's at least 7 members of the Christopher Foley cabinet. When they were in government a decade ago with me, they voted for the repeal of the ban on uranium mining in this state. Why wouldn't you repeal that ban now? Except they will not touch it. Yeah. I'm not talking about nuclear power. I'm just talking about allowing uranium mining. South Australia mine uranium, Northern Territory mine uranium. They have for decades. It's a huge source of royalties for the state. You know,
they don't want to touch any values issues.
What's hard about that? If you want to go net zero, that's the only way of doing it and having a modern, industrial economy. Yeah. Sorry, Ed.
Even a simpler one as well. Like, it's been a year since they've been elected now. Competitive unionism. There is a group called the Red Unions, alternative nurses, teachers, all of these different areas. You've got an Olympic build coming up and you're trying to just bash the CFMEU down. We'll see how that goes. But why would you not completely level the playing field for competitive unionism? You've got these unions who literally fund against the LNP day after day after day, and there's this clear incentive from a righteous perspective of workers should have the choice of who represents them. They shouldn't be beholden to a group that spends their money on stuff like the gender issues, other social campaigns that are irrelevant to workers. So it's a very clear case, I think, of principled stances sort of going to the back, instead opting for, okay, what's the polling saying? What's the issue polling saying?
Anyone within the LNP today, and they say, oh, we shouldn't be having we shouldn't be doing the class wars, we shouldn't be talking about values issues at all, we've just got to stick to the tin tax. All people care about at a state level is crime, healthcare, hospitals, cost of living. They're not concerned about the bigger picture, but the bigger picture drives all of those things.
Well, but then going back to how you started this particular segment, Damo, I mean,
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
These are people who can't read polls. The fact that One Nation is at 14% in the polling, which I believe is totally accurate, is because the parties, sort of a traditional base have gone, that's it, we're over here.
Do you think we could see a UK-style reform thing where we get, people go to One Nation so much that One Nation sort of peak at around 20 or something? Where do you see that heading?
I don't know. I don't know what limit I'd put on it, the way it's going. Because, again, the LNP politicians, from the Premier to the most junior backbencher, ignore the wishes of their rank and file. They're bleeding members, they're bleeding voters.
They don't want members.
Crisis.
Why? They don't want members. They're keeping people out.
Exactly. I think this is emblematic of what's happening nationally as well. And there's a real, particularly from young people as well, there's a real craving for principles. There's a real craving for conviction. Okay, what do you actually believe? Don't give me this politician squibble. Tell me what you actually believe. And from a conservative perspective, where they're supposed to be a conservative government in the most conservative state in the country, what have they conserved? And not just the LNP government here, but the conservative movement in Australia more broadly. What have we conserved? You guys are the one that have flooded our country with mass migration. You guys are the ones that have overseen plummeting birth rates. You guys are the ones that have overseen a housing shortage crisis as well. You talk in these vague terms about Australian values. You don't talk about the fact that we have a distinct Australian identity and all of these different things. I mean, even marriage as well. You haven't conserved that. So there's this, that you look at, okay, what's the body of work that the conservative movement have put in over the last 20, 30 years in this country? The left have won on all of these things.
So they've infiltrated, they've got their ABC propaganda machine, they've got education.
Well, they do.
So devil's advocate, just one more time, devil's advocate. They're going to say, Liberal Party people are going to say, there aren't enough conservatives in Australia to get us over the line. You guys, you make up maybe 30% of the population, the other 70% are left-wing. Are we living in a left-wing country?
Well, again, see, they're wrong, and they cannot read a poll to save themselves, and neither can the Premier, who stood up reportedly at the LNP convention and said that it was a mistake to look at appealing, to things on the right or having policies on the right, even though the votes have gone there. Even that's what the polling says. And back to what you were saying about conviction and straight talking, just reflecting on the election a year ago, Crisafulli would have won with a higher primary vote, perhaps 44 or 45, which would have been a devastating defeat for Labor and a magnificent victory for him if he'd have been able to deal with one issue during the election campaign. We know what that was. It was answering the question on abortion. The reason he got hammered was not whether on the issue itself, it was the inability to give a straight answer, and particularly in the debate. You know, and
it's that old thing of people.
What I think in a blue collar conservative state, he could have said, "I do support abortion, but I don't support these horrific Labor Party laws which allow babies that are essentially viable human beings being aborted for inappropriate reasons." You know, and it's quite shocking. So I've always been pro-choice, woman's choice, but I can't support these sort of abortion laws in this state.
Well, just a footnote on that as well. It was the QNMU, the Queensland Nurses Midwifery Union, the biggest union in the state that ran that campaign, the scare campaign of abortion that put the LNP last. So again, it's like, okay, it's been a year in. These guys are trying to destroy you. They're abusing their members' money. Why are you not levelling the playing field with competitive unionism?
So just to explain it for people who don't know you and the TPAA, so your Teachers Professional Association of Australia, you also have the Nurses Professional Association of Australia under the Red Union banner, despite the name Red Union, which drives me a little crazy.
It's a bit funny, isn't it? It's a bit funny.
You are the centre-right sort of, you're in the non-political, non-left-wing.
Apolitical, yep.
You don't support Labor. You don't support money going into Labor like normal unions do. So you're a union for people who don't want to support Labor, basically, or just want to have a politically neutral union.
More so the second point. It's in our constitution. We don't give money to any political party. So we'll talk, obviously union interacts with politics quite a lot and these different issues, but we're apolitical in the sense that we will never give any of our money to any political party of any persuasion.
Or resources, which is how the union movement support the Labor Party mostly. Right?
Well, that's it. The actual funding and the declaration
is limited.
You know, Campbell is like the tip of the iceberg, 10% if that. But yeah, more broadly, we're 30% more affordable because we don't give the money on to the Labor Party, essentially, or left-wing social and political
It's actually cheaper to be a part of your union as well.
Yeah, far more affordable.
Okay. So, as you're saying there, some of the ideological stuff is driven by these organised unions, right? They're pushing these things. So you've got radical left-wing people in these unions pushing a radical left-wing agenda through nursing, through teaching.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what's happening. And the whole, I mean, I was in a hospital the other day and you've got up on a Queensland Health Hospital, all of these things around about gender affirming care, the importance of affirming. And this is just in an ED. I'm sitting there, I'm just like, well, what's this got to do with anything? And this is healthcare. And then for
So can I interrupt? So if you had a health minister who really was going to carry through with this stuff, why wouldn't he have directed all that stuff to come down?
Yeah. Well,
so shame on you, Tim Nichols, that you aren't prepared to take a stand.
Yeah. And
shame on you.
It's following it to its consistent end, okay? Like I said earlier, if you're so strong on these puberty blockers being banned for kids, okay, answer the question. Can a man become a woman? What's the fundamental truth here, okay? We're not going to talk about values of, informed consent, all of this sort of stuff. Yes, that's important, but that's not the end here, okay? Is it true or not, Tim? Is it true or not? Premier Crisafulli, and we know the answer's no.
So back on the so what
yeah.
You think it? I mean, I reckon that if David Crisafulli said net zero is the road to hell, it's going to destroy our country, it'll destroy Queensland, it'll destroy our coal industry, it'll prevent us funding hospitals and schools, etc., and crime, fight against crime. If he said no to net zero, if he said this is the definition of a woman, and we will be sympathetic and kind to people who have different views and want to live their lives differently, but we're not going to have that as an institutional sort of thing. That's not a lurch to the right. That's just putting a statement there that it won't change that base or primary vote.
They're scared.
It will not change that primary vote. They won't. Those people won't go and vote for that 37%. They won't go to the Labor Party. They won't go to the Greens. But I can tell you, you might actually get people back from One Nation. What do you reckon, mate?
Well, I think that's true. And again, it comes back to that there is a craving for people to just know what politicians think. What do you actually believe in? What are your values here? And the Liberal Party values haven't really changed in a long time. We just sort of don't implement them, and particularly at a national level, these matters that on immigration, on the gender ideology stuff as well, on tax cuts, like it's just regurgitating the same old stuff that they think has worked in the past. But it's a different climate at the moment. It's a different climate, and people want, particularly young people, they're craving people who will get up and say what they think to be true.
Yeah.
And you can't, and they will snuff out very quickly if you're sort of about facing it. You're sort of halfway on the issue because you're just saying what's politically convenient for the polling. Come out and say what you actually believe. Let's have an actual debate. So much of politics has just completely thrown away the debate. And on that as well, I mean, Stephen Miles comes out and says Tim Nichols, who, again, we agree has done well on this recently. Tim Nichols has just made this decision based off conservative ideology. Why are they taking tips from the opposition leader? Like, what shouldn't be scared of what the opposition leader has to say.
That's an opportunity to go back.
Exactly.
And absolutely take the fight back to Stephen Miles and point out that they are dangerous left-wingers with extremist views that are not in accordance with anybody outside the inner 5Ks of Brisbane.
Exactly. We do want to conserve the sanctity of a child.
Yeah.
Like we do want to conserve the child's body.
Well, Tim Nichols should be saying, I think this demonstrates to Queenslanders that Stephen Miles is anti-family. He's anti-family values. He's anti-parents' right to bring up their children the way that they see fit. Yeah, like it's a free kick.
Yeah.
It's a free kick.
Yeah, well, exactly.
By the way, can I just wonder one thing, that I don't think there's any downside for Chris Foley on this, but why is he clinging to, we made a promise to keep coal royalties high? What's that all about? I mean, when does an LNP government cling to, we promised high taxes, we're going to stick to high taxes?
Yeah.
While the state's mining industry falls in a hole, which is happening right now.
Yeah, well, they're also terrified of the ABC. They don't want to offend anybody at the ABC. It's like, well, you're going to offend. They're always going to criticise you at the ABC. You're always going to be a right-wing,
Well, I keep being rude about the ABC, and then they get me in for interviews all the time, Damien.
Oh, well.
There you go. They need to try that out.
And good on them.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment with more of our special guests in studio. Ed Schuller from the Teachers Professional Association of Australia and former Queensland Premier and Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Campbell Newman. If you like The Other Side, one of the best ways you can support us is by signing up for the products of our sponsors. And one of our best sponsors is PIA VPN, the virtual private network that stops people spying on your internet activity. It'll keep you and your family truly safe from the prying eyes of big governments and corporations without slowing down your internet speeds. And you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. You can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and you'll get the discount. And you'll get more info on those special deals if you check it out. That's piavpn.com/otherside. Most Aussie workers want to belong to a union that helps ensure conditions in their industry are good and workers aren't exploited. But what if you want to belong to a union, but you're not very left-wing? Because workers were the focus of Marxism, the left's main ideology, and oppression of the worker by the rich was their main story to stir people up a century ago, unions have always been associated with left-wing philosophy. But these days, left-wing ideology is dominant in our society. It is the elite and the power base. And a lot of working class people see it as the ideology of the elites who control our culture and our institutions and even corporate capital in Australia these days. We live in very strange, mixed up times. And our union movement is so linked to the Labor Party that it can't really be separated from politics. Joining a union means funding and supporting Labor. So it's not surprising that alternative unions for classical liberals and conservatives, people who believe in hard work and fair reward linked to actual productivity, would emerge to reset that balance. And they're getting more popular. In Australia, they are, perhaps somewhat ironically, called the Red Unions. The Nurses Professional Association of Australia and the Teachers Professional Association of Australia are the main two. And they rose after it became clear that Labor governments and the mainstream teachers and nurses unions were not going to be backing professionals who didn't want to comply with a heavy-handed centralised government approach to COVID management. The National Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Australia is a young man named Ed Schuller, and he gave a pretty rousing speech at the recent CPAC conference in Brisbane recently.
In little over a century, the preeminent culture that set forth our nation of values with a clear moral framework has become a passenger, and chaos has necessarily ensued. To the morbid point now, where our ruling class would have us believe that our lack of a distinct culture is in fact our strength, that we're nothing but foreigners in a multicultural land, no common sense of purpose or identity. Our great country, born of untold trials and unrivaled exploration, built by the collective will of the working class, they're now working for what? One malignant force is without doubt the multi-headed beast that is the left-wing, anti-human union movement. You are sorely mistaken if you believe that their influence has dwindled as union membership itself has declined. They've been commandeered by the Marxists, by the communists, abandoning their roots, namely the Christian faith, which once held them in good stead. And now they control trillions of dollars through superannuation. They've spearheaded our moral decay as a country, and they've long taken over our institutions.
Ed Schuller joins me this week on The Other Side as a commentary guest, as does former Queensland LNP Premier Campbell Newman. I want to talk about education policy nationally, but before we get to that, just quickly, Ed, your red unions, why are they called the red unions? I don't get it.
Well, we started in Queensland and we were sort of associated with maroon, but then we went sort of nationally, and red, I don't know if it was a bit of a jab at the Labor Party will take your colour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny, isn't it?
It's a bit ironic, yeah. Okay, so you've got the nurses union as well as the teachers union that you look after, but there's the Nurses Professional Association of Australia as well.
Yep.
And that's really, I mean, it grew sort of immediately after COVID with the nurses not wanting to, adhere to heavy-handed vaccination requirements, and but it's just exploded, right? I mean, you're doing very well. I think 30% of frontline nurses now in Queensland.
In the state, which is where we started. So we only started in 2012. It was actually after the Queensland Health payroll bungle, and the QNMU didn't want to talk they didn't want to campaign against the Labor Party because it looked like they were heading to a defeat against your incoming government. But yeah, we started there 13 years ago. Now 13,500 members across the state of Queensland alone, and that's what we're looking to replicate Australia-wide.
Around Australia.
Okay,
the major nursing unions, particularly in Victoria, are going to freak out, aren't they? And teachers unions.
They are. Well, we set up an office down in Melbourne as well at the start of this year, so really putting resources into there, because the issues that we talk about today, they're even more rampant in Victoria. I think that's where a lot of this money and the ideas are coming from, is actually down south. So
is it legally stitched up, the union movement? Like, I mean, you're only supposed to have one union. I thought there were laws that said you're going to have one union per industry.
Well, in Queensland, the demarcation laws as well. But in Queensland, there's a conveniently belong clause, which is basically a group of workers can't set up their own union if they can conveniently belong to another one, which is basically just a monopoly clause. So the Queensland government needs to repeal that clause and allow competitive unionism in the state. And as soon as that happens, that's from the Industrial Relations Act of 2016. As soon as that happens, we're on a level playing field, and with the more affordable services that we provide, apolitical in nature, it's over for them. So that's why they hang on to it.
That could be done in an hour or two in the Queensland Parliament. It's a unicameral parliament, and in what way, in what world is that controversial to anyone other than the incumbents who are funding the Labor Party?
It's outrageous.
It could be done.
Just set up
like that is just remove that line, is what you're saying.
How have you managed to navigate around that?
With a lot of tact. So hats off to Jack and Graham. But yeah, they've tried to drive us out of the state. Even in 2022, in sort of the dying years of the Palaszczuk government, they stopped us from being able to represent members in the Industrial Relations Commission, which is obviously a pretty important thing for a union professional association to do. So they tried to drive us out of the state. We've found ways around it to a certain point, but it's a year in now, and now is the time for competition. And it's the workers that will actually benefit from
determine it. Yeah. I mean, I think if New South Wales, Victorian, South Australian, West Australian nurses and teachers start to do what the Queensland ones are going, we want a different option, and they start to sign up. What are the state governments going to do? You know, they can't stand up against the people at the best of times.
Exactly. That's not their role.
Why can't Crisafulli and Blade do something about it right now?
Yeah, in Queensland.
Oh, that's the challenge. Why,
They could
right
be the
now?
lead- Well, they've got government. They're the only ones.
Yep.
All right, to education. Things are not good in our schools. Okay, again, Queensland's in the spotlight, unfortunately, on this week with the, I don't know if people interstate or around Australia are fully aware of the story of 140 high school students sitting their final exam, going in there all taught up and learned up on good old Octavian, Augustus Caesar. And then they get in and the exam's all about Julius Caesar. And the teacher's like, oops, we taught you the wrong stuff. That is just a phenomenally appalling error that could only be the result of a system that is just a mess.
That's the point. I mean, how many more bungles do we need? Whether it's in health, whether it's in education, the government can't run it. It can't run it well. It needs to be decentralised. And this is what we talk about. We've got a Go Local campaign where we want schools and hospitals to be run at a local level. There is an awful amount of bloat, as you would well know, Campbell, in the departments, in the government departments, particularly in education. There are so many people, teachers with teaching degrees that should be on the front lines helping fix the teacher shortage crisis, but instead they're in cosy office jobs doing a whole lot of nothing. So what we want to do is restructure that completely. And I think, unfortunately, the spectre of this man right here is looming for some reason over the government in terms of bold reform agendas. But that's what we need. That's what we need.
Their parents like, Campbell Newman cut the public service in 20.
Well,
then he got up.
But we didn't cut education. We boosted education. We in only a 3-year period completely reduced or eliminated the backlog of school maintenance funding. I could go on and on and on. But these cowardly, pathetic LNP members who spent 10 years curled up a little ball who wouldn't defend their own legacy. Our legacy in education from 2012 to 2015 was a proud one. Okay, it was a proud one. If it wasn't a proud one, why? Well, Langbrook's now the education minister. If he did such a bad job in 2012 and 15, why is the education minister again? And by the way, if you want an example of how pathetic this department is at a departmental level, these kids had been given the wrong stuff to study, but somehow they couldn't turn their energies in a crash through 24-hour period to create purpose-designed exam questions for those affected schools.
Yeah, it should have taken an hour.
That just shows the breathtaking incompetence and I would say laziness of these people. Laziness. I've been very angry about watching this on TV. We start talking about dispensation and just go and create some questions for these particular kids. Someone should have been able to do that in about, they could have sat down and done it in about 2 hours. Someone else could have checked it in another hour or two, and it could have been done and very carefully controlled security-wise and issued to the appropriate schools at the right time. What's so damn hard about that? Give me a break.
How and why is it the kids' responsibility to, in a 48-hour period, learn all of this stuff that they've done over months and months?
I'm seething about it, as you can tell. I just extraordinary.
And the pressure it puts on these kids at the most stressful period of their lives.
Why can't Langbrook say this? Why can't he deal with it? Why can't Crisafulli deal with it? Whose head's going to roll?
What policies should we have, Campbell, around education? You brought in the independent schools, which gave more autonomy to the schools.
It's what Ed's saying, really. It's about getting people out of that stupid department that are a bunch of pen pushers and checkers and whatever, getting good quality teachers onto the front line. They've just done, from what I can see in the media, an extraordinary pay deal with teachers, which sees them getting a lot of money, being rewarded for their efforts. The focus now needs to turn to performance of schools and teachers. The onus on them.
Well, the problem is market forces would do it, right? So why don't we fund...
Remember Gonski? Well, yeah, absolutely. Remember Gonski? We had to give a Gonski. We piled even more money into education in this country, as they did in the United States over the last 40 or 50 years, and educational outcomes have flatlined or even declined.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
So it's got to be about accountability, for the performance of schools, and that means accountability for teachers and principals in the schools.
Let's never
And it's
kind of
not
come
a-
with a centralised government approach.
Well,
we need a
well,
decentralised voucher approach, right? Give parents the power,
Well-
give them the funding, give them the money. You get a voucher, you pick the school. The
Well-
good schools will succeed, the
well,
bad
maybe-
schools will fail. The good
maybe
teachers will get paid more.
I'd be firing a few principals if they can't lift the. They've got all the money they need. We've got fantastic, beautifully well-run schools, maintained schools in terms of the fabric. We have more classrooms and more air conditioning and more devices and more this, that, and the other than we've ever had before, but they're not performing. It's the people, and so the performance has to be driven through the people.
But unions and bureaucrats don't care about performance. They care about how many years have you been a teacher, and you got to get paid as this other teacher that's been there for the same. Doesn't matter if you're a good teacher or a bad teacher.
We've still got a situation where the union sits on recruitment.
Recruitment boards,
employment,
LCCs, all of these different things.
Did you know that?
No.
Well, if you're going for a job,
Is that all across Australia? Is it?
well, in this state,
Definitely in Queensland.
yeah, there'll be a union rep has to sit on the panel.
Yeah.
That's
So-
written in
So you're a member of this union.
It's happening in Queensland. It's probably happening
Yeah,
everywhere.
what if you're a member of this union, happen to be fairly vocal
Yeah.
politically? You're going to get the gig?
No,
Of course not.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Now, I've just got to pick up on one thing because it might
Yeah.
be something we
Yeah, if you
disagree with.
disagree,
But
go if
that,
you like.
that teacher's deal was horrific in every single way because it was such a missed opportunity for, again, a Conservative government to reform the education system. What it's done is basically 8% over 3 years doesn't keep up with inflation. And I understand there's struggles across the economy for workers, but it doesn't keep up with inflation. They've put in into the EB this another QTU-run board to make decisions on student behaviour. They haven't increased principals' power to expel. That's not there. There's no real student discipline management at a local level. So we've encouraged our members to, as well, if it gets through to a non-QTU vote, to vote no, because the government can't keep avoiding the question of reform. And we were after a greater pay rise, not just for retention, but because that's only enabled once we localise the education system. And that's what needs to happen. We need more independent public schools, and we need the government to be a facilitator, not a manager.
Yeah, that's
and I
right.
think that's the big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's an ideological difference, right? I mean,
Well,
it's a fundamental difference, which is supposed to
On
be
the
what the
issue of
LNP
pay,
do.
I look at the reported pay packets of teachers, and while I might have to accept the terms of the level of the rise, you're saying 8% over 3 years, that the headline figure, which is a six-figure sum of money to teach, well, I demand as a taxpayer and as a former parent, as a parent with former children in the education system, I'll be demanding performance out of that. I don't think for the sort of money they're getting, they're performing.
Well, we should be demanding performance out of the bureaucrats who are getting 150k to 200k.
Well, I don't want the bureaucrats because I don't know what they do. They can't.
Exactly.
They can't even turn around an exam for kids, as we talked about before.
If that's not their job, then what is? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think
like
that's the
nurses,
point.
They burden the bureaucrats. Don't just take funding from the frontline teachers and the frontline nurses. They burden the frontline teachers and the frontline nurses with bureaucracy.
They make their jobs living
paperwork.
hell.
But just
Correct.
remember though, there's plenty of money.
Right.
There is plenty of money.
Oh, I don't
The money. There are piles of cash going into education and right across this country, but the outcomes have flatlined or gone backwards. More money's not the answer. I can't emphasise that enough.
Right.
It's the same as our.
Well, we don't have any anyway, so that's good.
Yeah,
we can't
well-
borrow any more
well-
than we've borrowed. But
Well, we've got high coal royalties, supposedly. Is that what that's funding?
Well, and just to be clear as well, it's not a funding issue, you're right, but it's where the funding is going. And there is so much money in the bureaucracy at the moment. That's the issue. And when we say we want more for frontline teachers, that's because they're the ones actually doing the thing. They're the ones actually teaching. It's all of these bureaucrats in the background that are taking their resources and making their lives living hell. So we agree there's never been more money thrown at education and results have never been worse. So it's not a money issue in and of itself, but it's where that money's going. And that's why we weren't happy with this.
And
deal.
only a large centralised government-funded system could afford that kind of waste. If it was a streamlined market forces system where parents were empowered, the customer was empowered with the dollars to decide what schools their kids are going to, what teachers are going to get paid more and what teachers are going to get paid less, and we let market forces operate, you would see the efficiency go through the roof, I think, and you'd see education levels go through the roof. As a libertarian, you've got to agree with me.
Well, yeah. well, maybe. I'm not sure, but I
sensed you don't.
But for me, Ed's got to be nice because he's got members out there, so he's not going to dump on his members. But I'm afraid it's his members that are the problem. I mean, they are. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Let's not. We talked about straight talk. Yeah, if we make a generalised statement, the problem is in the classroom. Who's in the classroom? The teachers.
Yeah.
Okay? The teachers have to perform. The principals have to perform. I don't know if it's what you said, Damo. Maybe it's school boards. Proper school boards who are empowered to actually hire and fire, and get rid of teachers who want to teach, I don't know, gender ideology in the classroom, or say we're going to go.
It wouldn't last 5 seconds if it was.
But that's what's going on. I mean, like if we go back to sort of pre-COVID, where we had Extinction Rebellion and teachers clearly in the classroom, preaching left-wing stuff to kids and saying, and the then Premier said it was okay for people to take a day off and sort of go and protest.
I know.
All that sort of stuff. I'm not going to paper over this. I'm sorry to really go hard on it, but it's the money's there, the classroom's there. We can blame the education department for their bit, the bureaucrats there, but there's a problem in the classroom.
I agree to some extent, Campbell, but I don't think you're attributing enough blame and responsibility to the department. Yes, there is a problem in the classroom. Why does that problem exist? We have got very high quality teachers. Obviously, our members. I mean, I spoke about those stats. Our members aren't the ones that are trying to indoctrinate children. So I'll push back on that.
Your members aren't. Well, the Queensland Teachers Unions are,
that.
or the Victorian Teachers Union, or the New South Wales Teachers Union. I mean, it's just these are. We've got a situation with teacher education that's
the teacher
appalling.
training's
The
terrible
standard
at
of teacher training in our it's left wing indoctrinated. So we've got these left wing kids teaching left wing kids teaching left wing kids left wing stuff. Round and round it goes.
You're right, and what we want is reform to the actual teaching degrees, because teachers, young kids are getting into classrooms teaching often at the same school that they were just at 4 years prior, and they're completely thrown in the deep, and they have no clue because it's not the teacher training courses aren't preparing them at all. We want paid placement, similar to apprenticeships, for those teachers to go into classrooms. It gives, pseudo non-contact time for the existing teachers. But there are so many issues riddled in education. But I'm sorry, it's not the teachers in and of themselves whatsoever. The frontline teachers are doing a damn good job. It's the education bureaucracy, and the teachers themselves aren't being prepared well enough. That's where I think we disagree.
Right. Okay.
Well, I'll go to the health system as well. And with the greatest respect, there's this thing in this country. We won't speak against nurses or doctors in our public hospitals, and we're not speaking anything ill about our frontline teachers as well. But these things have to be said in the public sector. Yes, people have to put up with the burden of the bureaucracy, and I acknowledge that should be eliminated, should be taken away. But when we hear about the stuff ups in our hospital and poor care, etc., I mean that's a frontline person who's been involved in a failure of care, maybe outright negligence. Okay, but we then say it's the health minister's fault, and it's time we stop doing that. We've got to call it like it is, and what it is. It's about. I think where we are agreeing, it's about accountability.
Yes.
But we won't get accountability if we can't. If we can't. It's like during COVID and when in the UK with the NHS, they had all the people out rattling the pots and pans and they were heroes and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Let's stop doing that. It's not the health minister's fault when someone fails to treat a person who dies in the ED because they weren't given the right care at the time. That's not the health minister's fault. That's the person who was in charge in the ED. That's the next person above them, etc. That's the CEO of the hospital.
Yeah, but if they've got
it's the board.
bureaucracy and idiotic stuff like
Victoria's
rule about Indigenous people getting priority.
But we won't deal with these issues while we keep saying anybody who works clinically is a saint, and the problem's in the bureaucracy or at the political level.
Yeah,
that's just nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I've got to wrap up, guys. But
just fine. I take the point. I think a lot of that comes back to training as well, because there is a shortage, because it has become so unattractive, because there is so much waste in the bureaucracy, and the money is going there instead of the front lines. they're compromising on standards for teaching and for nursing. You see this with a bunch of overseas nurses and teachers coming in who aren't trained to our standards whatsoever, going into the front lines, and that's not working well either. So I think a big part of it is training.
Thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it. Great to have you back on the show, Campbell. Great to have you in again, Ed. You're welcome anytime. Thanks for joining us. So Ed Schuller and from the Teachers Professional Association of Australia, one of the red unions. You can check them out online if you're interested in getting behind that and supporting it, particularly if you're not in Queensland, you're in another state. That would be, it's time to really get behind these alternative associations. And Campbell Newman, the former Premier of Queensland and Lord Mayor of Brisbane, joining us there on the other side. Back in a sec. And that's all for this week's episode of The Other Side, your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. We will be back with episode 433 next Friday, November 7. And clips from this show will be dropping throughout the week as usual on our YouTube, X and Rumble channels. If you like what you see, please do support us. We are a voluntarily viewer-supported show. There are now two ways to support us financially. One is to go onto our website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up to the exclusive side for less than $5 a month. Or you can now subscribe right here on YouTube, if that's where you watch, by simply pressing the join button beside the subscribe button down below. It's that easy. You can press that subscribe button if you haven't pressed it for free and at least help us to get the algorithms on our side a little bit. That would be greatly appreciated. Make a comment, share the show with your friends. All that stuff helps too if you can't afford to help us financially. The QR code at the bottom of the screen will take you to our website to sign up. You can sign up for free too. You do not have to financially support us to get on our mailing list, so please do sign up there and you'll get my weekly email. And of course, if you do financially support us on our website, then YouTube doesn't take a cut, which is good, but that's your call. I'm Damien Curry. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damien Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.